more fun facts?
Isn't it awesome to see some of your favorite content creators and favorite people, honestly, if you follow here on this app, be a part of this amazing community called the Nerd Initiative?
The Nerd Initiative presents the Comic Press Podcast, hosted by JJ's Comic Stuff.
The beauty of live podcasting, gotta love it. What is going on, everybody? You are listening or watching to the Comic Press Podcast. I host two different ones, and it gets confusing. Once again, my co-host today is Michael Rothman, one of the co-founders from Nerd Initiative, and our guest today is KodyCollects, a buddy of mine from the Crossover Comics crew. What's going on, man?
Glad to be here. Happy to talk some comics with you guys.
Happy to have you on board.
Yeah, it's a long. You guys asked me a while ago, right? So glad I could finally show up and excited.
Yeah, man. Because you're also one of the newer people on Nerd Initiative too. So we wanted to take a chance on it with this podcast to kind of showcase more of the people on the team. Yeah,
it's a lot of Nerd Initiative people. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So
it's hard to keep track.
It really is some days. I'm sure you've seen the Discord, man, it gets crazy in there some days. But just to get everybody getting to know you, man, what is your nerd origin story, Kody?
I love this question. I absolutely love this question. All right, so I guess it all started, with my mom. I like to say, nothing tragic. It wasn't like a classic, superhero origin story where something bad happens. It's just my mom who it really kind of got me into and supported me in being a nerd. Watching Batman animated series, take me to the comic book store maybe like once a month. I would just buy any comic cover that looked cool and had Batman on it. Batman was my guy growing up, And yes, yep. It kind of went like that for a while, but then Air Force kid, so moving around a lot. I didn't have a LCS or whatever, so I kind of fell out of comics for a while. But still kept up with everything going on with MCU and all the DC movies and stuff like that. So I was still a nerd. I just didn't read comics for a little bit. Eventually, maybe every birthday or Christmas, I would get a graphic novel here or there, a trade. And then it was 2020. Everybody's home, a quarantine, whatever. I needed to pick up a hobby. So my girlfriend said, "Hey, why don't you get back into comics? I've been talking about it for a while. Why don't you just do it?" And then I started pulling. At first, I used Midtown Comics online because I didn't have a LCS. But then I moved. Now I got an LCS like 2 minutes away. It's been great,
best, man. Having one right down the road.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I could probably walk, but it's literally like a 2-minute drive. It's awesome. But yeah.
I was saying, Michael says he doesn't have any comic shops near him, but man, you're in New York.
Yeah, but it's not the same, right? And it's funny. My wife just texted me. She's like, "You look like you're concentrating." I was like, I was making sure everything was working right. On like a third. It's like Midtown Comics is great. That's a blast. I just remember growing up as a kid, like a 90s kid. You had like the local comic shop that was like the neighborhood comic shop that brought everyone together, right? And I think New York, it's tough to ever really have that, right? Because it's a totally different experience. So when I say that, that's kind of what I mean. Like I don't have like that where the guy's name and you know everyone that's in there. I remember, I grew up in South Florida, and there was a comic shop. It was called Sports Cards, which is an amazing name, right? And it was it was the neighborhood spot. Like they would have contests there, whether it was like games or Magic the Gathering, whatever it was, and it was just a blast. And everyone showed up there for like like the Breaking of Batman or Death of Superman. It was like lines around the block. And so that's the local comic shop to me. And I guess the big city takes the feel out of it a little bit, but I could be wrong, and maybe there is, I don't want to give anything a bad name. So yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. So, but Cody, was there like specific characters you gravitated towards heavily, like as you were getting more and more into this stuff, or was it just like a particular company?
Yeah, for sure. So I think at the start, like I was saying, Batman was my guy. I was also pretty big into the Ninja Turtles. I mean, everybody loves the Turtles, right?
If you
Name
grew up in the
someone.
90s at all, yeah, you're a Turtles guy.
What
Like,
we talk to, the Ninja Turtles are like the entry point for like anything.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just like you got the action figures, the shows going on, whatever. So yeah, immediately as soon as you're like 5 years old, you love the Ninja Turtles. But so yeah, definitely Ninja Turtles. I guess from the Marvel side, it really was only Spider-Man that kind of resonated with me
Mm.
at like younger age, and then
mm,
like everything going on in DC. I had Cartoon Network on 24/7, so like Justice League, like I said, Batman animated series, and all that kind of like I was really into Cartoon Network and DC. That was like my home. Uh, I really love like Barry Allen Flash or John Stewart Green Lantern just because he was in the
Justice League show.
show. Yep. So for the longest time, I didn't even know Hal Jordan was. You know what I mean? So
No, I'm the same way. That was my Green Lantern introduction as a little kid. Was
exactly. Yep.
that cartoon?
Right. Which it's probably blasphemous to say. I don't know, but
It is
No,
what
I
it
mean,
is.
there's a whole new generation, I'm sure, of younger kids who like Peter Parker's and their Spider-Man. It's like Miles Morales.
Right. They know
So,
Miles Morales, and it's like, hey, more power to you, man.
yeah, 100%. I think so. A moment for me too. One Christmas, I remember it very vividly. Right, I'm opening it up. It's like a book. I'm like, what could this be? It's like huge. Open it up, and it's Walking Dead Compendium 1. And I love telling this story. It's my favorite one because my mom got it to me, gave it to me because, well, I guess Santa gave it to me, whatever. Anyways, so she got me Compendium 1 because as a family we would watch the Walking Dead show. This must have been, like right in the middle, like season 2 was just coming out or something,
hmm
pretty early on. So she got me the compendium, and her idea was, okay, I know this show is based on a comic. Get Cody the comic. He's a nerd. He'll read ahead and just tell us what happens in the show. Because they were so into it. My parents love Walking Dead.
Well, it's too bad that diverged drastically from the book at some point. Like,
Yeah, at some point, right? So I just remember like that Christmas, that Christmas break, I binge read the whole. I must have read the thing front and back twice, or twice or something. And
wow.
I just showing my parents like, oh yeah, so this character is going to be introduced, probably in season 4, and he's a pretty bad dude, all that stuff. But so getting to share that with my mom, and she kind of seeing, comic books are more than just your superhero stuff. So that was my
Mhm.
first introduction to the whole indie side of comics. And I got attached to characters like Glenn or Rick, stuff like that. But
Mm.
but yeah, Walking Dead, that was really important. I love my Compendium 1. That's like my favorite collected edition that I have, just because it means so much to me. But yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned like your parents and like your mom. Like that's a special thing, and I think a lot of it's unique. A lot of kids, we see it like in like TV shows and movies and stuff like that. Like parents want to move them to what they want to move them to. It's kind of
Those
amazing.
comic
Like,
books will rot your brain.
but just in general, if there's something they're into, whether it's sports or this or that, like whatever, it's kind of a special thing when a parent really kind of like leans into what you're passionate about and also just gets into it with you. They must be like super proud of what you're doing now, that you're turning into like a creative medium, and you're taking what you're a fan of, but you're also putting stuff out there as well, which is pretty awesome that you're like creating on different platforms and doing things. It's got to make them super proud of you to see what you've, turned.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Like for my mom, I think she gets it more than my dad. My dad, he's just like, I don't know why you'd make a video in your life and your face is in it. Like that's kind of weird, right? So actually my mom, like now you mentioned it, she got me like the tripod I have back here. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Oh, nice.
she like buys, like she sent me like, hey,
I'm
I'm
guilty of
sending
my
you a
mom buying me
tripod.
equipment once or twice too. Just like, here you go. I know you need this. Like, what? Sweet.
Right, because I think like I was doing my first couple videos like this, right? And then she's like, that looks awful. I'm sending you a tripod. I'm like, okay, sure, sounds good. So
Art,
she
dude.
supported in that way too. Like
That's awesome though.
yeah. Yeah.
Especially, you know, the whole content creation thing. Like, not a lot of like people older than our generations get it.
Mm.
Right. I think
You know,
she
like even
definitely
people
gets it.
Michael's age, like you're not even that much older than we are, but even people your age don't really get it a lot of the time.
I like how you say people Michael's age. Like I appreciate that.
Well, like, I mean, you're
I'm
older than
I'm
me,
kidding.
so.
I'm kidding. No, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a weird thing. Like, I mean, they talk about it, right? Like, and I think having worked as long as I've worked, right? Like 10 plus years, going on 15 plus years, like you think about like digital natives being something that's new, and the same thing goes with like social media and like people that grew up with. I can't imagine growing up like in school with social media. We didn't have that like in high school, and like
Yeah,
I
that
would
was
have
at the
been.
tail end of my high school.
Yeah. And so, and then content creation is another thing too. Now you're putting yourself out there on a platform where, you know, thousands, potentially millions of people are seeing stuff and then interacting. And also, and you have to think about how, as a parent, like how do you handle, you know, if you want to support your kid and make sure they're not, you know, it's a lot of negativity out there. Make sure they're not in a bad spot where it's going to affect them. Oh, I made a video and people didn't like it, you know, and really hammer home the, you know, the generic things that you've seen for years where people say like, look, it doesn't matter. It matters that you're having fun, you're enjoying it, you're connecting with people. And if it does well, great. But if, you know, someone comes out and says something negative about it, you try to shrug it off, and it's hard to do that. It's easier said than done. So it's a whole new thing out there. And so seeing it transform, I can only imagine people that are like 20 years older than me, not understanding any of this stuff at all.
Right, because to a lot of people, it's not real because it's either not on TV or it's just not a physical thing, so they don't see any result from it. But it's like it's all in the screen.
I remember. I mean, I'll be quick. My classic line, like I'll say this and I'll shut up, because I can talk a lot. I remember
We got to get a shirt made of that.
I know. I want to get a hoodie that says like one last thing and then I'll shut up. I remember getting my grandfather towards the end of his life. He was really proud of his time in the war and his time like in business, and he really was getting excited about this stuff, and he had a really interesting, you know, life. And so I made him, I ran out of gifts to get this guy. So I made him, I knew what was important to him. I made him this like website that was kind of like, I think it's defunct now, but like it had all these cool things about his life, and I wrote stories and I had photos and stuff. And I remember going to dinner and showing him like it was his gift, and like I'd spent all this time on it and bought an iPad to like show him. I get there and he's like, "Is the iPad my gift?" I'm like, "No, it's the website." And he's like hitting the iPad, like he's like, "Wait, what is this?" And he couldn't figure it out.
Right, like it just didn't click. Yeah.
No, at all. He was
But that's like those old videos you see of when the internet first came out, and you see the newscasters trying to like, what is the little A with the circle around it? Like it was like a complete foreign language to him at that point.
So yeah, he didn't truly understand that gift.
Yeah, it's crazy now, right? Because you got people are making some money doing this content creation thing. So I guess it's hard for my dad to like make that jump. Like first off, like why would you do that in the first place? And then who's gonna pay you for it? You know what I mean? Like what do you
like
why
who
you
would
wasting
pay
so
you
much
to
time?
do that? Like right, yeah.
Right, yep. But no, I mean my mom gets it. My brother and sister, they're super supportive. So yeah, finding some great success. I'm having a lot of fun making the stuff, and the communities I met along the way have been great. So yeah.
That's what's up, man. Well, I think that's a good opportunity to segue into our next segment here. And that is, do you think there are too many comic book events? This is a thought. And now bear with me here. I've got some logic behind this. You, Cody, especially, you've heard me talk about it. I think there's too many comic book events. I really do. And I think it disrupts other storylines that are going on a lot of the time. And I've had my gripes with it. I didn't really understand how big of a thing this was until I started looking up numbers. So
Lay it on us. What do you got?
In 2022, DC had 3 major events. Okay, this was last year. That was Trial of the Amazons, that was Shadow War, and then it was Dark Crisis. Trial of the Amazons was 8 issues with the tie-ins. Shadow War was 9 issues, including all the tie-ins. And then Dark Crisis was 27 issues with all the tie-ins. That's not that big, right? Those sound pretty reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get to Marvel, had 7. Okay, they had 7 events. Avengers Assemble, which was 10 issues with the tie-ins. The End of Spider-Verse, which is 11 issues with all the tie-ins. And then you've got AXE Judgment Day, which was 52 issues, including the Prelude series and the tie-in issues. Reckoning War was 8. Banner of War was 5. Dark Web, which is still going on, is 26 issues with all the tie-ins. And then Destiny of X. Anybody want to take a guess how many this has since it started back in January of 2022?
30. Oh, okay.
Wow. I think
130 issues and counting.
Oh, I thought you were saying 1.
No, I was saying more.
That by a lot. And then no, it's 130. Wow.
130 issues with the Prelude series, all the one-shots, all the tie-ins, and it's still technically going.
JJ, I think you might have even I don't know. It all blends.
That feels
together,
like too much.
Together. But I think he might have even forgot an event, a Marvel event. I think Devil's Reign was last year, right? And that was
I think like Devil's Reign started at the end of 2021.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I think that's why it wasn't on the numbers that I saw for 2022.
No, I mean I get you. That's just crazy though. those
so again, I will ask: do you guys think that there are too many comic book events these days?
I mean, is it even a question at this point after you went through that whole?
Yeah, I think so. I think it depends on like what you, so like to me, right? If there's an event for a series that you're reading and it kind of fits in and it doesn't disrupt anything else that's going on, essentially it's like an arc, you know what I mean?
Right.
But then you get into the issue, like you said, where you bring in all the tie-ins and you got the prelude.
That's what
issue.
I'm more talking about. These giant crossover events that just seem to disrupt everything that goes on around them.
Right, because a story is going along, and it's like, okay, now we have to. The classic example, and this really kind of bugged me, when I started reading the Nightwing series by Tom Taylor. There was like the Fear State event that was going on. In
and that was going to be my next example. That derailed everything else that was going on.
Yeah, so 100%. That's like the example I point to where it's, Tom Taylor's doing his thing. He's writing a great Nightwing run. And then you have Bruno Redondo doing insanely good art. And then all of a sudden it just gets derailed because, Dick Grayson has to go all the way back to Gotham to do the Fear State stuff. I think it's only maybe, 2 or 3 issues. I can't remember. But yeah, it's like
such a jolt to the system when you're reading it. Like, it's just it just completely... There was no transitional material there.
Yeah, because then right when it's over, he's back in Bloodhaven doing his thing, continuing with the run. So it's like, why?
Almost like Fear State didn't happen. Like, it was weird.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think to your question, there is too many. I don't think anyone would disagree. It's just like.
Oh, I got some comments to share that were disagreements. So right here, Bumpkins. Okay, well, he agrees with us. They need to go back to one big event every summer
and nothing else.
Yeah, which would be a lot easier to deal with, especially as a newer reader.
Right. You just got
it's so hard to get into stuff as it is, and they just put out these massive things, and then they change the titles of stuff and
renumber everything.
Right. And then we've got Comic Crumbs right here. He's like, they're good if they're well planned and span their respective universes with continuity. Otherwise, it seems like a cash grab.
I mean, that's what it is, money, right? Like, you're doing these events, hoping people jump in. And I think, we talked about the 90s. I think that's kind of where they started to take off. We had, I remember the crowning achievement was the Death of Superman and Breaking of Batman. You had the preludes. You had like the Sword of Azrael and his like run, the origin, Vengeance of Bane. Then you had the breaking, and then you had it was Nightfall, and there was and then you had with Superman, you had all the follow up series and the Funeral for a Friend, and Yeah, it's a cash grab. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I wasn't around. I know you guys definitely weren't around. Like, or like the cool, like I mean, Secret Wars, the original was in the 80s, right? Is 83, 84?
Early 80s, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine how cool that would have been to wait all year and then have one big
Right.
It's 8 parts. It's huge. You meet a new character. There's so many cool things that come out of it. And then
here on YouTube, we've got another opinion coming in from Rome's Guide, another buddy of ours over at Crossover. He says crossovers are really overrated back. Yeah, overrated back. They would do one a year, kind of like you were just talking about. That's when they matter. The less and more better. Yeah, they shake it up. Like it's got to be an event where it actually means something and changes up everything.
So like, you brought up the example of Dark Crisis, right? And then it got revealed that it was actually, Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths, right? The sequel, the follow-up to Crisis on Infinite Earths. And, the whole time I'm reading it, I'm a DC guy, right? So I got all the tie-ins. And as soon as it's over, I don't want to spoil it. I guess I don't know if anybody watching it is trying to keep up to date, but the whole thing is that the Justice League dies at the start of the event or leading up to the event, and then they're just alive at the very end, and it goes on like nothing ever happened. I guess that their whole point was they're kind of bringing back the idea of like infinite multiverses and all that stuff, like bringing everything. It's kind of like a retcon and just bringing everything back. It was kind of the purpose for it. But it's just, I mean, you're going to kill all these characters and then literally just bring them back. I think even in like the second issue, they say like, oh, I don't think the characters are dead. Like they're just
in a pocket universe or something.
Exactly. In Pariah's pocket universe or whatever. I can't remember which issue that was. But
bro, I was so confused going into the beginning of that run because especially like I hadn't been reading a lot of DC up to that point, and people were like, oh, this is where a new run starts. You could jump right in right here. I'm like, cool. I read that first issue and I'm like, what in the hell's going on? Like, why is Pariah so powerful all of a sudden? Like, I was so lost.
Well, so the problem, JJ, is you didn't read it sounds like you didn't read Justice League Incarnate, which was a series that led up right before that. But there was also another series right before that, which I forgot, Infinite Frontier, I think. So if you didn't
which
read
was
14,
going on at the same time as Fear State and Future State.
I think that might be right, actually.
All three of those events in DC were going on at the same time at one point during like the late 2021.
Yeah. And that also is, again, I think we talk about, when you talk about toxic like fandom and stuff like that, you always talk about the thing of gatekeeping, right? Mm-hmm. That's an organic way of gatekeeping. Like it's hard to enter.
That's almost the company gatekeeping to new people.
Because it's just too much, right? Like, I mean, I think we talk about the MCU and not to veer off comics at all, but we talk about the MCU and like what's happening now is it's expanding, onto shows, and DC's obviously has their plan now. And there's so many things going on. There's animated, there's shows, there's movies, there's, so it's not just like, when they always said the good old days, right? It's not like, oh, okay, there's Iron Man 2, there's things you can enter in and get caught up. Now there's so much stuff out there, and now you don't need to know everything, but it is overwhelming, I think, for new fans and new people that want to get in and want to read and jump in and like aren't, haven't been invested and caught up. It's difficult. Like it's really difficult.
Well, and that's where people with shows like, especially with like Color Break, Kody's podcast that he has with Comic Book Stash every other Friday, they go over like whole runs of books pretty often. So like you'll get a rundown of this one story. That kind of stuff is great for new people.
Yeah.
Because it's one complete thing. You may not know the entire overall arcing history of the character, but at least you get a full coherent story you can read.
I remember I was doing audiobooks for a while, and there was this one book, and I forgot who wrote it, but just the fact that he wrote it for this one reason, it was a whole book on how to enter into different like franchises in comics. So like where to enter in for Spider-Man, but like it was also like, and then in the end, like the overall theme of it was like to each his own, right? Because you can't tell someone like, oh, you got to enter in, but he went through, and it was a lot smarter than way smarter than me. The way he was able to organize it, like and it was beautifully, and it reminds me of exactly what you're saying about Kody and Comic Stash. Like, it was beautifully and eloquently put of how to do it, and like, but also sharing a little bit of history. So they talked about like Fantastic Four. The entry point for him was like 51, like This Man, This Monster, which is like the beginning of like cosmic and the beginning of like multiverse, you know, all these things. And so, but the fact that, again, the fact that a book is written on this of like how you should enter these things.
That shows the need for that, though. The fact that somebody felt like they needed to write that, like, that shows that there is, you know, there's not an easy way into some of these hobbies.
And he said, don't do it chronologically. That's all I'll say.
No, so
you'll never catch up.
I have two minds about this, right? Like, I think there's never a perfect place to start, right? It's like you guys are saying, it's really tough. There are good places to start, but yeah, the perfect place to start is just going to be off in the distance. You'll never be able to grab it. So I think, you know, spinning out of these events, right? So like coming out of Dark Crisis, now it's like the dawn of DCU or whatever. So I think now is like a good time for people to jump on. But to you guys' point, I mean,
how long before they do it all again?
Exactly. Come April or May when the DC does its other event, and then yeah, it's going to shake things up again. Yeah, I don't know. There is a lot. I think also if you're already reading the series, like, so for the example, Devil's Reign we talked about earlier, right? So I was keeping up with Daredevil. Chip Zdarsky is doing an awesome job with Daredevil. I just want to name drop Chip Zdarsky. I want to talk to him one day. Anyways, so Daredevil's going strong, and then they do this event, Devil's Reign, and there are tie-ins, but I didn't feel like the tie-ins were necessary to the story. Asking my LCS lady, she says, "Oh yeah, skip the tie-ins, no worries." So that was great, right? Because I'm already reading. It's just a continuation of the Daredevil story that I already loved. There are smart ways you can do it. I think a good tie-in. I don't know. It's tricky because most of the time tie-ins are not. They don't mean anything in the grand scheme of the event. They really are just.
The only time I've seen tie-ins that work really well are like if you're reading the main run and a new character busts in out of nowhere and you're like, where the hell did they come from? And then they do a tie-in explaining how they ended up there.
That's cool. Yeah.
That kind of stuff I can see. But again, it tends to derail the other storyline that's going on for that character.
Yeah. I mean, some issues of Dark Crisis were just so tough to get through because every single speech bubble's got that little asterisk, you know, see what happens. And the whole page is just like filled with them, right? It's pretty rough. It's definitely pretty rough.
And the fact that you have to have a table of contents on every other page means that your event is too convoluted.
Oh, dude, the classic, right? It's like your event, and then you got the one page, and it's a checklist, and there's like, you know, make sure you get all.
And it's got like 15, just like 25 different issues on it, and they're all from different series, and it's like, what is going on?
So it's so weird, right? It's definitely a balancing act that they have to do. So to your point, right? So you brought up Avengers, X-Men, Eternal Acts, right?
Yeah, Judgment Day.
I didn't read Judgment Day, but I've heard it's actually pretty good, and I've heard that the tie-ins for that are actually, you know, some of them are pretty good.
And that's what I've heard. But again, 52 issues in one event. That's a lot to read, man, for anybody.
No, for sure. 100%.
Especially if you've got like 20 other series that you like that are going on, and you're going to take all your time up just reading that one event.
Yep.
I think that's why more and more we're seeing people like really gravitate towards one character instead of following it all. You know, like we have like Paperweight is a huge Iron Man fan. He's like read every single Iron Man book across, you know, the run. And then obviously, you know, Sean at Caption Life is a huge Daredevil fan, and he loves Doctor Strange too. So that's another one. But no, I think
we got to shoot that shot every time
every time.
He's gonna love C2E2. But yeah, so I mean, again, we had another person. Juan reads, he doesn't care. He likes all the extra covers. So there's that aspect too, where you get most events come with a lot of variant covers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They want you to double up, right? They want you to get the A cover, the B cover, and C cover.
Then you have the retailer incentive cover. So it's like,
Well, and besides the incentive covers, then you've got the shop exclusives and the convention
Yeah.
exclusives and the blank covers, and I mean, the list goes on.
the virgin covers. And I mean, it's funny, like I will say, like Bumpkins did who commented earlier, did a really great because I actually didn't know, like coming back into comics, like I didn't know what retailer incentive covers were. I knew what variant covers were, but it's a lot, right? And I didn't know it's like every 100 you order, you get get one.
Yeah,
or
they got like 125s, they got one in 50s, one in hundreds, one in the thousands. There's all kinds of them now.
And so he really kind of distilled it down in a really good way so you can understand what it was in a video. And I appreciated that kind of stuff because otherwise it's just
it's like trying to find your way in the dark without a flashlight, man. Like you don't know where to start or where to turn or when you're gonna hit a wall or
yeah.
It's almost like for like new readers, like you have to start reading comics in like January. Like if you
right
you miss out
when all the
then,
news runs start.
right? Like after the event, after the events after the event of the summer, right? And then you starts winding down January and your runs start up. So that might be like the best time. But man, if you're in like August, that's rough. That's rough for a new reader for sure.
Yeah, you're either mid main event of the year or at the very end of one. Neither of which is conducive to knowing what the heck's going on.
Yeah. It's almost like you need a guide.
Yeah.
A beginner's guide.
I know I need to start breaking down the beginner's guides by like more than just a random character. I don't know. I need to find a new way to start doing that because everybody also wants to know different stuff as far as a quote unquote beginner's guide too.
Well, I think, the whole topic we're talking about, maybe there's I think would be interesting is a beginner's guide in events, right? Like, whether it's a crossover event or a major, world event or universe event, that's interesting. I reread Secret Wars because of the movies. And I did the same thing. I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but I did the same thing when Infinity War was announced years ago. I reread, the Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, sagas, and it was super interesting and just kind of nice to kind of go throwback to like, your childhood and remember those things. And so they can be fun. You just have to kind of pick your battles of which one you're going to pick up and read and which one you're going to be like, all right, no.
Right. Well, and perfect segue. Speaking of reading and pickups, let's go into, I don't know if you've been picking up new stuff, Michael, because I know you don't really hit up the shops that much, but I know Kody reads a lot during New Comic Book Week. So you've provided me with your top 3. I've got my top 3. So who wants to go first?
Take it away, JJ. You're the host.
All right. Well, first off, this is in no particular order, but I've got Gargoyles #2 by Greg Weisman and George Combadeus. I'm sorry if I know I butchered that name. I apologize in advance. But if you grew up in the 90s watching this show, it basically picks up about 5 years after the end of the cartoon. So it's all the same characters. It's still in continuity. Everything has still happened. And it's just basically them picking up where we left off.
So I've never seen Gargoyles, so it's like a franchise that people talk about fondly. Like people love there's some real gargoyle heads out there.
It was
man.
not a very long-lived series. It only lasted a couple of seasons. I think maybe 3 or 4 seasons tops. And it was on like WB in the morning, like it was like super early in the morning when that show would come on. So you either loved it or didn't know about it.
Right.
I mean, 90s, I always think of Legend of the Gnome. Sorry. The Disney afternoon was fire.
But for those of you who do know about Gargoyles, the main big bag, Xanatos, I believe is how you pronounce his name correctly, has basically kidnapped a newborn gargoyle. And now they are pretty much on a blood feud revenge quest to get this kid back.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so it's only an issue 2, so not a lot has happened yet, but it was nostalgia for me. I'm a sucker for it every time. you know.
So JJ, is that series? Is it like going to be a mini series, or is it actually going to be an ongoing?
I believe right now it's set to be a mini series, but they have not ruled out if it's going to get picked back up again.
I got you. Yeah, no, that's cool. That's a good pick. I mean, it's like all the nostalgia stuff coming back, right? Like I'm sure you guys mention it all the time, but like Darkwing
and
Duck
that
just
won't.
came back.
I
Right?
was gonna say that won't be the last thing. We'll wait for that one.
Oh,
Trust
sorry.
me.
I don't. Yeah,
You got a fan of Gilligan's Island? I mean, it's all about nostalgia these days. It's fine.
Oh, 100%.
Nice. Yep.
So, all right, what are we going with first for you, Cody?
Oh, okay. Here we go. So, first one I want to talk about. We talked about it a little earlier. JJ's got the slide, but we got Action Comics 1051. So, I mean,
look at
to
the
what
size of the team on this book. First of all, before we get into it,
so
3
there's
writers,
an
3 artists.
Right. There's an explanation behind that, right? So everything leading up with the whole Superman side, right? So last year we had Action Comics, which was Superman off in space on War World fighting Mongol. Whole big epic tale. It was like 18 issues long or something like that. Superman comes back to Earth. So John Kent takes over the Superman title while his dad's away. So that was Superman, Son of Kal-El. So that series is kind of being folded into a different series. Anyways, Action Comics 1051 is like the new, hey, this is what the Superman family is, and this is what it's going to be going forward. I thought it was such an incredible, just I guess like the vision of it. So we got 3 different kind of short stories in it. So like, sometimes you'll read a comic and it's got a backup story, right? Classic. So this is being treated as kind of 3 backup stories, but they're all their own. They don't feel like a backup story. And so going forward, each issue of Action Comics is going to be, 3 like slices of the Superman family. Different creative teams will be jumping on for each arc, I guess. I just think it's like a really good idea. I kind of want to see DC do this more with, there's some members of the Batman family that don't get a lot of love. Like, like Signal is a big one that everybody says, right? I think this kind of formula is really kind of smart. I mean, you get 3 stories in one. I guess it's $5, so that's kind of a lot, but it is like oversized. It's a little longer than your traditional comic book. But yeah, I think it's great because it's introducing me to a bunch of writers and artists that I wasn't aware of previously, and I think it's just a great idea all around. So yeah, Action Comics 1051. I think it's a great place to start if you're looking to get into kind of what's going on in the Superman side of DC.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's one I was planning on picking up because they're also coming up with Superman 1 again. Like, it looks like they're getting ready to restart a lot of the runs.
Yeah,
for DC.
sure.
So that's where I'm really planning on trying to keep up on stuff later on in the year for that.
Yeah, so I think it'll be maybe is there gonna be 3 Superman titles, and I don't know.
I know there's one for John Kent, there's one
for
Clark, and I think there's one for Supergirl coming. I want to say.
I can't remember. There's either 3 or 4.
I think it's Tom Taylor or Tom King doing it, because I remember they were making fun of their friends on Twitter, calling their friends nerds for being excited about a new Supergirl run.
Oh, I got
like
you.
As like a like nerds, like, but obviously he's the one writing the dang book. So
I think I remember that actually. Either you shared it or someone.
I forget who shared that, but I know I saw it.
Dude, plus I will say, I mean, you got Dan Mora on the cover. I think Dan Mora is like, he's the guy right now. I think he draws superheroes. No, he's untouchable right now, in my opinion. I think Dan Mora just kills it. So yeah, a lot of good stuff packed into a great issue. I'd recommend Action Comics 1051.
That's awesome. Well, and then I guess we will get into the one that everybody got excited about for a second real quick, and that is Darkwing Duck by Amanda Deibert and Carlo Loro. Have you guys read this?
Yeah, dangerous.
I mean, same thing.
Have you guys watched the show?
I'm more familiar. I've seen episodes of Darkwing Duck, whereas Gargoyles, I haven't seen anything from
Love
Gargoyles.
Darkwing Duck.
I was gonna say, I know Michael knows about some Darkwing Duck.
Yeah.
This is basically the TV show if it came out today.
That's awesome.
So like instead of him arguing with his daughter about, going to the arcade or something, he's arguing with her because she wants a cell phone.
Right. So just in a modern time, that's pretty smart. I mean, that's
I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't read it, but like smartphones are kind of part of the whole plot of the first issue.
That's great. And for those who don't know, fill us in on who Darkwing Duck is.
Oh, he's Drake Maverick.
Yeah, but he's what? He's the nephew of no.
What's the relation?
No, that's he's related to Scrooge McDuck somehow.
I think he's he's a nephew or cousin or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. But he's basically the cartoon duck equivalent of Batman.
Yeah.
Mixed with like the shadow and the spirit.
Right.
Very old-timey feel. I definitely know that from the show for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean just his real name, Drake Maverick. Not only is it names for ducks, but
well, I remember I was gonna say because DuckTales came out and then Darkwing Duck was like a spin-off of DuckTales.
Yeah, because Tailspin is his helicopter pilot in Darkwing Duck.
Yeah. So good.
Oh my gosh.
Dude, it's the MCU so before the MCU. They had it in like
yes, Disney had it first with all their because remember Tailspin had Baloo from Jungle Book. Was like one of the main characters. Like there was so much crossover with WB and like Disney cartoons back then. It was insane.
So good.
The 90s were great, man. I miss it.
They really were a great time.
So I will say,
who posted? I follow a great follow on Instagram. It's Rob Liefeld, and so he posted. I think he was poking fun at himself too. And he's like, "What was all with all like the satchels and everyone had pockets and bags and vests and stuff like that? Like all the heroes. 90s was like a fun time, man.
It really was. Even though I was still really young in the 90s, I was born in 1990. But I can still remember vividly all the TV, all the clothes, like everything, dude. It was just what I don't know. The 90s were awesome.
The muscles, just so unrealistic.
Well, so I don't know, Michael, have you seen the DC recently did a line of like 90s rewind covers. So like variant covers. So that might be something you're interested in because one of them, it's like Batman and Superman standing next to each other and the capes are just like so crazy. They're like filling
Todd McFarlane style like capes over the top.
Yeah, it's just like makes no sense. And they did another cover that was focused on the pouches, and it was just really funny to look at.
One of my favorite segments on YouTube is Mr. Sunday Movies is great. Like great podcast. It's a great show. It has great segments, and he was doing. I think it was around the time when Dawn of Justice is coming out. He really was lobbying for the Superman to bring back the mullet that he had in the 90s. You got him with the wavy hair with the long mullet, and so it's just
classic.
The black outfit with the silver S on the front.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad Snyder brought that back, and then also, I mean, the first one to do it was the WB was the first one to do it with Tyler Hoechlin. That's another name I'm gonna butcher. Hoechlin or Hoechlin or.
We apologize in advance for anybody's name we screw up.
Exactly. But he's actually a really cool actor. I'm a big fan. But yeah, I mean, but the mullet, man, the mullet was such a weird.
It was so bad, it was good.
You know what?
I remember a Superman action figure I got in like I don't know, it was probably like a Burger King meal or something. And he was about that tall, and it was just the black skin tight Superman outfit, which was weird because it was black all the way down to his boots, just the silver Superman S, and then the black mullet, no cape. It was just like I'm like looking at it as as I'm older, I'm like, this was a little suggestive, like just complete skin tight black leather.
And I think you have like you brought up McFarlane. I think you have him and others to blame. Like had they left for, I think they left for Image Comics, right? So everyone was testing things out, and I think DC and Marvel are no different. When they lost all their big guns, like it was just like a huge, and so everyone was just throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what they could come up with. But it was awesome.
It made for some interesting things to read, that's for sure. Yeah. So, all right, Cody, what was your next pick?
Yeah, so next pick I got. Batman One Bad Day Catwoman. So if you guys are not following, I guess what's going on over at DC's been doing these Batman One Bad Days, where each one kind of focuses on a Batman villain. So they've had Penguin, Two-Face, all the big hitter rogues from the Batman side of what's going on. And each one just kind of it's kind of taking the idea of like Killing Joke, right? Where you have that one bad day that makes you whatever. So each one has got a different creative team. So this one with Catwoman's got G. Willow Wilson is writing it, and I wasn't familiar with the artist, but I mean the art in this is absolutely killer. And I don't know, it's really kind of focuses on. So the series as a whole, the One Bad Day, some of them are a lot stronger than others, and that just goes, that's just how it's going to be with different creative teams. But definitely the Catwoman one is stand out. Just getting into Catwoman's head and what makes her tick, and like the kind of trauma that she had in her past, and what pushes her to be Catwoman in the future. So I thought it was a really good examination of Catwoman as a character. And I think the One Bad Days, the ones I would say that aren't as strong, maybe Penguin and Two-Face are the lower two. Everything else is like in the top tier of what DC's putting out. So if you're sleeping on One Bad Day, definitely got to go back and check it out.
Now, here's my one gripe with that series so far, is that because I haven't read them all, but I was gonna be waiting for like the hardcover. I was assuming they were gonna put these in a collected edition. They're releasing each of the comics singly as a hardcover.
I got you. And yeah, they're not that.
So they're releasing them all separately. They're not in a like collected edition or anything.
I have seen that they are doing like a box set, but it's going to be all of these lined up in a box set, so nothing too crazy. That's a little disappointing. I think it would. Yeah. It'd make a great, like, maybe somewhere down the line they collect it all into one.
Because I mean, how many are they doing? They've only got one or two more, right?
Yeah, I believe was it Clayface and then Ra's al Ghul still coming.
Okay, so yeah, that would be about the perfect size for like a good thick trade,
I think the Ra's al Ghul one, Michael, is from Tom King, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe he's doing the Clayface one. I can't remember, but yeah, I mean
G. Willow Wilson is no slouch. I mean, talk about a iconic writer, and to show you my age, I didn't even know she left Marvel. How old I am. And like I remember interviewing her for Inside Marvel years ago, and talking about when I think it was during the Civil War II run. So this is a while back. And so yeah, I mean, a little humor, but also great writer.
Yeah, she gets Catwoman, especially. Like I think maybe it's Teenie Howard on the current Catwoman run. I haven't been keeping up with it, but I mean, if G. Willow Wilson, jumped onto the Catwoman book, I'd be picking that up for sure. I think she really gets the character. So yeah, that's my number 2. Definitely think it's worth a pickup.
Nice. All right, so you guys know I couldn't do a top 3 list without throwing something indie as hell in there. So my third pick is called Grim Space from Scout Comics. Dude, this is
I like the cover.
This is one of the most interesting things I've read in a while. So basically, we all know the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, right? He gets magic beans. He goes and he's supposed to sell the cow for money. Instead, he gets the beans, throw them outside. Beanstalk grows, giant gold egg. We all know that story. This is basically the exact same story, except in space. So instead of trading a cow for beans, he trades a broken robot that he's been trying to fix for a navigation unit. And the navigation unit gives him all these sectors of space that were technically unexplored, but that all of a sudden he's got maps to them. And him and his family are like junk traders and bounty hunters.
It sounds like a mix of like Star Wars.
It is almost, but it's so funny because they do encounter a giant. Offer it. They encounter their ship is called the Beanstalk. All the characters have the like fairy tale names like of those kind of stories. Like there's Jack, obviously. There's hang on, let me open this up so I can actually.
And I mean, did we all notice that they 100% ripped off the bad guy from Mortal Kombat on the cover with the 4 arms and like.
Listen, yeah, it's a cool
What's the guy's
character design.
name?
If you're gonna steal something, I would steal from what's his name? It starts with a G, right? Like
Right. So like this
Gorgo
is
or
the first
something.
thing that the navigation unit takes them to is another ship.
Right.
So it's dude, this thing is insane. The artwork in it is nuts.
A little bit of aliens feel in there. It's like a really, I mean, this must be like written by and produced and created by a big fan of fandoms, you know, from
Right.
like.
But see, like right there's the giant and there's his golden eggs. I mean, it's the same story, just set in space, basically. And instead of a giant beanstalk, their ship is the beanstalk, and this navigation unit is the magic beans.
No, that's pretty smart. I love when they take creative people, right? So not me necessarily, but they can take like a classic. I'm not I'm not a comic writer, I guess is what I was trying to say. But yeah, taking like classic story that we all know and putting their own spin to it. I mean, JJ, you were just reading Fables, right? Like same kind of thing where it's just a different take on these stories that we already know and love. And it sounds like the way JJ is describing it. I mean, it sounds like they actually succeeded in making it compelling.
Oh yeah, it's actually like I pick up usually if I don't like issue 1, I'm not going to read anything else past that. This one I subscribe to on my pull list. So if that tells you anything,
that's awesome. I mean, and it had you stumped. Like the only thing you said was like, dude.
Like it's so hard to describe to people, but it's basically Jack and the Beanstalk set in space. Replace the beans with a navigation unit, and the beanstalk is actually the ship. Like,
well, I mean, who owns the IP to Jack and the Beanstalk?
I think it's I believe it's public domain at this point.
I would hope so, but I mean, maybe there's some things that surprise you how they're not public domain yet, but
either yet or they've just been repurchased over the years, so they haven't had a chance to go public. So, okay, we're on to your last pick here, Cody, and this is one I've actually enjoyed a lot too so far. It almost made this list for me, so I'm glad I didn't pick it, or else we would have had a problem. But that is Black Cloak #1.
Nice. I like how you put the Peach Momoko cover because that's the one I got as well.
Yeah, that was the cover I bought.
Yeah, I had to go with the Peach cover as well. It's probably the best cover in my opinion. No, so I mean, Black Cloak is it definitely surprised me for sure. The hype around it. I think this is on Kelly Thompson's Substack, if I'm not mistaken. Image is doing the physical release of it. But people who have read it on Substack or whatever, I think most of it's out or all of it's out. I can't remember, but they've said, listen, guys, this series is one to look out for. So I had to make sure to pick it up when Image started publishing it. So it follows this girl, JJ. I can't remember her name. Maybe it doesn't matter. But so her role is Black Cloak. So essentially, she's a detective in this kind of like this sci-fi fantasy world. It's not really clear if there was like a war. There's like a lot of lore, a lot of world building. There was a war that happened some time ago.
It's a pretty thick book too.
Yeah, I mean it's good quality too because how much is it? It's $5. Never mind. I was gonna say classic comic price.
But Image charges less for their stuff anyway. Though.
Yeah, it's cardstock, Michael. Yeah, you're right. It's definitely higher quality than what some publishers are putting out.
Yeah, I mean that's just like the one I just showed you guys, Grimspace. That quality is insane, and it's an indie publisher.
So I guess like the hook to this story. So there's been some murders of some of the royalty in this world, and she herself, she is an exiled. I guess maybe we don't know what happened to cause her to be exiled, but now she's essentially a detective investigating these murders. One of them happens to be like a good childhood friend, maybe even a past lover. I guess that maybe they're kind of hinting at it, and it's just like this. I don't know if JJ, what do you think about the art, like in particular? Because to me, I'll show you an example here, Michael, so you can see it. But it's kind of like I don't know how to describe it. I've heard some people negatively call it like a webtoon kind of art, and I don't know if that's accurate. I don't really read, I guess, webtoons, but
And see, here's my issue with that, because a lot of the webtoon stuff I've seen, it's not that it's bad quality artwork. It's that it's very
like, yeah, exactly. I know what
it's
you mean.
like
Like it's stylized,
not,
right?
I don't want to say amateurish, but it's not done usually by people who've been drawing for 30, 40, 50 years.
Right, like exactly. You're not going in like it's not super detailed. I mean, the environments are, but the characters themselves, I mean, they have, great character designs, and it's very cartoony. It's got a style to it, right? Like it's not going to be your traditional comic book where everybody's, looking lifelike.
Mhm.
But just the world building on top of, I guess, kind of the hook of, she's investigating these murders and we're going to see it play out. And, like why is she exiled and that sort of thing. I think this is a great first issue. This is definitely my favorite first issue in a while. Image always does, incredibly good stuff, but like I said, this was on Substack before.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would recommend Black Cloak. Maybe if you're at at your LCS, you flip through it and see if the art is, see if it is or isn't your thing. That was my only thing reading it. Was it took me a little bit to kind of get adjusted and acclimated to this kind of art. It's not traditionally what I would go for, but like I was saying, Kelly Thompson's writing, all the characters are, you can tell that they're characters you're going to end up loving. It can be funny at times. Yeah, I just thought it was a standout first issue. So definitely don't sleep on Black Cloak. Make sure the art is something you'd be down to read a bunch of issues for. And I guess the last thing I'll say about it is people are comparing this to Saga, which I thought was kind of interesting.
I have seen that a lot. People are saying that this is Saga rebuilt, is what the quote I keep seeing.
Right, like it's got it's this huge world that it just plops you into, and you're kind of figuring it out as you go. I definitely get Saga vibes. I mean, it helps that it's sci-fi as well. But yeah, I would say check out Black Cloak. Yeah.
And what again, I keep saying, for those that don't know, I'm like the newbie bringing in the people that don't know. What is Substack? Might sound like a stupid question, but what is Substack?
So it's like this whole thing. I know
it's like another crowdfunding type deal.
So like in traditional sense, I think Substack would be for like if you're a journalist and you kind of use it as like a blog where people can pay, and then they get access to all your content.
Okay.
Substack kind of started to pivot, and they say, hey, we want to get into comics as well. So they're kind of attracting and pulling a bunch of comic writers and artists, all creative. I think the creators, own all their stuff. I don't think Substack
it's sort of similar to Patreon from what I've seen of it.
From what I've seen, I haven't messed around with it too much. I haven't, supported any creators on Substack, but I mean, it seems like it's giving them the freedom to do kind of wacky, crazy stuff. Along the same lines, Michael, Tom King's on Substack, and he's got a series. It's now being published by Image. It's called Love Everlasting.
I've seen good things about that so far,
and that series is standout too. So I don't know, maybe Substack's like the place to be.
That's cool.
Again, it must be all digital, and maybe some people prefer a physical copy, but that's why I'm glad these creators are taking if they're not stranded on Substack, right? It's not like no one's ever going to read them. Like they are partnering with Image to put it on the stand. So I think it's great. But
it makes sense. I mean, look, SoundCloud for up and coming artists. I mean, JJ knows all about that. And then I think that's the thing. I mean, you can't for people out there that that if things don't go through the traditional forms, they kind of put their nose up at it, like if it's not Marvel or DC, or if it's not, coming through mainstream,
but that's where all these big indie publishers are finding all these new books to put out is on Kickstarter. Like, I just did an interview last night with Alan Dunford, the writer of Pocus Hocus, and they just got picked up for Source Point Press. So Source Point's getting ready to re-release their comics starting again at #1 with new cover art and all that good stuff, like later on down the line.
It's really cool. I mean, look, they always talk about, we're in the golden age of TV and everything. It's cool that we're kind of in this expanding age of other mediums too, with comics, and it can start digital, then go into print. And it's funny. It's really funny that like the way to work your way up is to start on a platform like Substack or other places like that.
Or
and then,
Kickstarter. Or
then in this day and age, you've made it when you got the print copy in your hand. Like, that's so random and retro to think about. That's so
Right. The
funny.
comic medium. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
It's one of those rare media forms that hasn't really fully caught up to technology, and I kind of love it for that.
Well, the value. I mean, the value and the intimacy. I mean, digital is still fun, and like a lot of us have like Marvel Unlimited, and DC has their counterpoint.
Well, there's some stuff you just can't read unless you have those.
Yeah.
Like the old stuff from the 40s, 50s, 60s, you can't find that stuff in shops for under $30 an issue, you know? I mean, and that's if it's even together enough to read.
Yeah, if it still has staples.
Right.
Staples haven't rusted out or whatever.
I saw, you know, the one of the cooler things I've seen, and then my classic, I'll say this and shut up. Someone, one of the onlines, I think it was Grail's, you know, the Instagram platforms to buy comics. They had today, and I was so tempted, but it wasn't expensive. Was Human Torch 2, which is actually Human Torch 1, and it was the 5th ever Marvel comic, and it was signed by Stan Lee, no cover, super brittle pages, but it was graded. It was there, it was intact, and I was just like, this is crazy from 1940. So, yeah,
man,
yeah, that's crazy when you get like when you say like the 5th comic Marvel ever published.
So
that's
nice.
just when you get, oh man.
Well, apparently, like I don't know how it goes, but like I've seen that a couple of times, and I got to look into the history behind it. But like, it's Human Torch 2, but I think it's actually 1, and I think maybe they count Marvel Comics 1 as like Human Torch 1 or something. When
it's one of the it's something like that, because I almost want to say it was.
Because the label
might have been Marvel Comics #1.
Yeah, because the grade literally says Human Torch #2, but then in parentheses is #1, and I'm like, that's how hokey is that? It's like going back to Spider-Man 1, like Peter Palmer, like it's just so funny.
But
like,
they weren't really like back then. They were still trying to figure out how to structure it all too.
They're like
so
making it up as you go, right? Like
oh, cool.
Yep.
That's history. It's so cool.
Yeah, 100%. Well, okay, so we are out of picks. So is there anything, Cody, that you want to plug before we let everybody on YouTube go?
Yeah, I mean, thank you guys for having me. It was a ton of fun chatting comics with you guys. So I guess, you know, if someone wanted to find me, they can find me on TikTok at KodyCollects. Doing a lot of trying to do, I had COVID like last week, so I took a break from posting, but trying to do my everyday thing. Got a couple series starting up. So we're doing Black Label reviews where I'm ranking and reviewing every DC Black Label series. And then I also started a new series the other day. So it's short box stories, and it's focused on kind of the history behind like the comic book, you know, medium and the industry. So my first video I did of that, I'm really proud of it. I did, it's talking about the greatest comic book collection of all time. That's kind of like the hook. It's the Edgar Church pedigree, the Mile High pedigree, if anyone's familiar with that. So yeah, I'll be starting a series where I talk about that. And then, yeah, that's, and I guess I should mention, so the other podcast I do, if you liked hearing me talk about comic books, I guess you can find me on the Crossover Comics YouTube. On there, you'll find a ton of different projects that people got going on. But a podcast that I do is called Color Break. JJ mentioned it earlier. I do that with my co-host Comic Book Stash, and it's a ton of fun. We're going to C2E2. I want to mention that as well. We're super excited for that. Hope to be doing a live episode, you know, in person, because I never met Christian before. An in-person episode of Color Breaks. That should be great.
Get ready for lots of photo bombs on that episode, I'm sure.
Probably, yeah. If it's at
there's gonna be a house full of us, man.
yeah,
I'm
sure.
so excited for that, man. Yeah. And we gotta get, dude, Short Box Story sounds epic. We gotta get that one. Shameless plug. We got to get that on Nerd Initiative, because that's such a cool concept, just to kind of give you more exposure. But too, like, I can't wait to dive into those. Like, that's super dope. And then the last thing I will say is, and I'll shut up, is people have been posting photos from the Mile High, like from the shop. Those prices are nuts. Like, and I understand the pedigree and stuff, but it's like 2 and 3 times. It's crazy.
So, I mean, that's like the whole thing, right? Is that he gets to, because there's nothing else like it, he can set the price whatever he wants, right? Yeah. So yeah, I think that's something I do want to cover too, because he shook up the whole you know, Overstreet price guide, right?
Mm-hmm.
it's like, hey, Overstreet Price Guide said this would be like $50, but it's in like the best quality that no one's ever seen, no one's ever going to see it. I guess I'll sell it for like 1,000, right? For example. And it's like, I mean, listen,
Hey, if you can name the price, why not, right? At the end of the day,
you found the
it is a
collection, I guess,
business,
you know what I mean?
right?
But,
So
yeah,
And
it's
now they
super
get the little
interesting story.
stickers on the graded labels too. So like all those different ones, like from different pedigree collections. Like I still my one of my grails I think that I need to get is I really want to get a comic book that's from what is it? It's the official tailor of Stan Lee. Like he has his own label now on CGC, which is the coolest thing. David, I think it's Parso or I forgot. I'm gonna butcher his name as well. But like, how cool is that? If you were the tailor of Stan Lee, that you have your own like pedigree label on CGC now. Like that's insane.
that is so nuts.
It's so cool. So yeah.
I just think like the whole I feel like that's a niche that no one was really touching on in TikTok, so I wanted to jump in. I'm super interested in history, and I just felt like it was a perfect marriage. So yeah, look forward to doing more, and for sure I'll get it on Nerd Initiative. Absolutely.
God, it's such a cool concept, man. It's so cool, dude.
It's a lot of fun. Like doing research and like writing the scripts for those has been a ton of fun. Finding all the pictures, they're kind of hard to find of Edgar Church, but yeah, so doing the research for that has been a blast. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with that.
That's awesome, man.
It's awesome.
Well, as always, everybody, make sure you go and head over to nerdinitiative.com for all the latest interviews, reviews, previews, and all kinds of other stuff going on. Make sure you check out Color Break Podcast, which is KodyCollects show every other Friday on Crossover Comics YouTube channel. And we will see you guys in 2 weeks back here on the Comic Press Network. Everybody have a good night. Be safe, be kind, and take it easy.